G'day everyone. Well, thought I'd show everybody around the front yard. Another not very nice view of the house. This is something I've had for about 5 years. It's a Nissan G60 Patrol, 1978. Actually, it's a G60-H. The difference is, it's slightly higher up than the standard G60. And if you look at this diff, it's huge. I don't know what size it is, but I'd say it's a 10 or 11 inch diff or something like that. You can probably get a better view of the diff, how big it is from here. That tyre there isn't actually that small, it's just the diff really is that big. And I've got just a piece of crap made all over the breather, keep the water out. Well, it's also got really heavy springs. To give you an idea of how heavy the springs are, that's my hand, so they're not small, they're really thick and really solid springs. It's also got a very heavy chassis, and fuel tank's surprisingly not that big. They weren't that bad on fuel. This has had, I think, 1 complete coat of paint. It needs to have another 2 or 3 coats. I've even got the customary, yes I know I was lazy, I didn't take the plastic badge off before I painted it, but I'll just take the metal chrome naked lady off and just face it back with some sandpaper and give the whole thing a coat of paint. Then she'll really look cool. Anyway, it's full of crap at the moment, dirty old curtain and shit. G60 Patrols almost never really changed much throughout the release, which was in 1960, I believe. They ran from 1960 to 1980, which is a very long model run. And as you can see, I've started painting the inside of the cab. Ran out of paint. The difference between this and one of the earlier ones is this thing's got a heater. I've actually had the heater apart, flushed the core, and that packing there is actually concrete expansion jointing. What it came out with was destroyed, so anyway, this thing's had almost a complete rewiring. That's why the wiring loom looks so good, nice and clean. And I had 2 design criteria, which was indestructibility and a simple design. Probably not as simple as the original, but I wanted to start using relays to relieve some of the old switches of their loads. Not everything's actually been used. I have the original ignition key on the dash over there. Switches a rail to ground. That's for the starter. Just an industrial sort of button. That's the ignition switch. Just like with any normal industrial sort of things, down is off and up is on. This panel hides what used to be for the cigarette lighter, ashtray, and someone had cut a bigger hole for the radio. So we can walk around. So it's just got a strap there, you know, nothing too exotic. The Masonite should paint properly now that it's absorbed some paint. Front panel there, the radiator support panel, is pretty much just sitting there. It's not actually bolted on at the moment. And this has still got that crappy plastic Nissan badge on it. I still haven't taken it off yet. Put the naked lady on. That's because I have to make a template of the other side where I've already put one of them on, so that this side looks the same. And piss this stupid curtain off. That's my lockout. So to start it up, you'd turn the ignition key on, which just switches a rail to ground for these switches here. So what you do is you have a relay, and the coil of wire on the relay, instead of switching, instead of having a fuse which sends power to a switch and then the switch sends the signal to the relay to turn it on, what I've done is wired the relays up so that the coil of wire is powered permanently and you just simply send one wire in the dash per relay, and you just switch the relay to ground. So on just simply switches the return from the relay coil of wire, and that has one really big advantage. Well, two actually. One, you use a lot less cable because you haven't got as much, pardon me, cable passing through the firewall. And the other thing is, if something happens and a wire gets chafed through, it's only ground. You know, it's only the other side of the relay coil, so it's switching it to ground anyway, and it won't have a short circuit. I mean, obviously it's not finished, and I've had the truck for about 5 years. It's had a bit of rust, so still a little bit rusty, but look, it's a 4-wheel drive. It's not like it's a sports car. This looks like it was fabricated with some kind of bender, but actually this is one of those old-fashioned computer lids, like the old desktop computers. It hasn't been riveted down yet. That's what that is. That's what, you know, you put your monitor on it, old CRT screen, and that's why it's so thick and heavy. This was going to go in, which is a Morse accelerator pedal out of a prime mover, truck, whatever you want to call it. But unfortunately, that really cool looking pedal doesn't clear that cross member under there. I'd have to do a body lift. Now, in Australia, or Victoria, sorry I should say, not Australia, they've just passed a law that states that only cars that have already been lifted are allowed to remain that way. If you try to roadworthy a car that's lifted, they'll knock it back now, even if it's only a 2-inch lift. This thing has a knackered motor. Well, actually, the knackered motor's over there on the ground. This is a spare gearbox one and transfer case. 3-speed. They've got a crash first gear and second and third are synchro. The gears are massive, they don't wear out, and unless you do something really horrible to it, they're pretty much indestructible. If I lift this up, this panel will want to fall forwards. This is what a Nissan G60 motor looks like. It's straight 6, 4 litre, very, very heavy, made a bit like a truck. It's got 2 engine mounts at the front, and you can't see them, but there's 2 on the bell housing. The gearbox itself doesn't actually have any mounts. It just simply relies on the bell housing mounts and the engine, which is bolted into the body to hold everything up. This is some of the wiring I've done, which is not finished. That's why it looks like such a terrible mess. The fuse box there is actually just a super cheap auto Nava blade fuse holder. There's another smaller one in the back. Everything is fused on a separate fuse, separate circuit. So whilst originally you had a fuse that did, let's just say, park lights and indicators, well, now there's 2 fuses instead of 1. The wiring needs to be tidied up. Now what I've actually done with the cable, I've got, I think it's PVC spiral sheath, which is really cheap. It's a lot cheaper than the corrugated stuff with the slit down it. And I covered the wiring loom with that, and like I said, it's still not finished. That's why it looks like a dog's breakfast. I put insulating tape to cover the spiral sheath. I wanted this loom to be indestructible, so that's why I've done it like that. It's not pretty, but it's very, very strong. And likewise, if I go down here, I've done it the same way. Can't really get a very good close-up of it, but it's really heavy, thick. This has to be tied up to, it's got to be tied up inside that that cross member, right out of the way. This thing had the fuel sander that it looks rusty and horrible, but that's because I cleaned all the paint off it. I know I'm naughty, I should have put something over it, but oh well. And actually got a wire that's supposed to be connected to that, but terminals are a little bit sad. One of them just earths out the sender, and that one goes to the dash. The earth wire originally was ripped off on God knows what, and that's why the gauge never worked. I got a separate wire now, heavier than it needs to be, like all the wiring I've done in this. but it means that it's going to be reliable. I'm sorry it's a long video, but oh well. This is a tray that came off it, and the reason why I took it off is this tray is made of 6mm check plate steel, and I don't know what it's off, but not originally this. Not only is it enormous, and just to give you an idea of size, I'm 5'9". This is how wide this thing is. It's enormous. Someone also put a tray lift in. That's what that rectangle section is, box, whatever you want to call it. I mean, obviously, originally it wouldn't have been made like that. Yeah, so that's how they've done that. But she needs a lot of work. The front diff casing is knackered, and if I can pull that bit of crap off it, probably won't see much, but you're not going to see much. But right here, there's supposed to be a stud that screws into that case there that holds that spring plate on. Now that's why if I pull this camera back, that spring plate's on an angle. It's on an angle because it's not got much holding it in. Someone's pulled the spring off it to do shackle bushes for God knows what reason, and they've knackered it. This thing went for a roadworthy with the spring like that. Actually, originally it failed a roadworthy, and quite dismally. Even the wiring loom failed, which is why I rewired it. Like I said, it's not one of the prettiest wiring jobs, but once it's finished and got a stack of cable ties, I guarantee it's not gonna bugger up ever again. It'll be indestructible. So this is my 4-wheel drive, and depending on money permitting, and it's not the only project around here, I'll be doing more videos of that. Yeah, so that's vehicle number 1, Nissan G60-H Patrol. Anyway, yeah, catch you later.